All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to give everyone a couple more minutes while I finish setting everything up. And then we have a presentation today, which means we will not be doing group check-ins. I've pasted the meeting notes into chat. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us. I've pasted our meeting notes in chat. Quick reminder, this meeting is being recorded and posted to YouTube live. Your participation in these meetings is an agreement to abide by the Cloud Native Security Code of Conduct, which can be found within the repo. I need at least one person to volunteer as scribe to ensure all actions and primary content discussed is recorded in the written notes and can be referred to later for those that are unable to attend. Do I have any volunteers? Got Ash and Axel. Awesome. Thank you so much. For existing members and working group reps, please remember to include your organization and company along with the working group that you're involved with. As a reminder, because we have a presentation today, we will not be going over updates. And I'd like to try to give everyone as much time back as possible because KubeCon and Cloud Native Security Con are next week. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to Simon, who's going to talk to us about Cartografos.
And Simon is on mute.
Apologies. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Simon Forster, and yeah, very happy to be joining you here today. Let me just share my slides here. Just bear with me for one moment. Great. Hopefully you should be able to see my display there. So yeah, first off, a very warm welcome to everybody. Yeah, my name is Simon Forster. I'm the founder of a small consultancy here in London, and I'm joined today by John Foreman and Robert Glenn, both of Accenture, and also Danielle Cook of Fairwinds. And we'll be delighted today just to run through with you a maturity model that we've proposed as part of a working group that we set up earlier this year, which has the Greek name of Cartografos, which means cartographer, in keeping with the spirit of many Greek names in the cloud native landscape. So a very warm welcome. Okay, over to you, John.
You guys see me okay?
Great.
Yeah, great, perfect. Okay. So over the last over 5 years, really, I've been talking to clients about their journeys. Okay, we all know there's a journey to the cloud, and then there's the DevSecOps journey, as well as the Kubernetes container journey. However, during the last 6 months, I've been really shifting this conversation. We kind of been turning it on its head, because today every client is multi-cloud and is on a container strategy with DevOps and cloud, all combined to one. So today, everything is really being reflective of a conversation going to the cloud native journey. Next slide, please.
Hey, this is Robbie Glenn. Sorry I joined a little late. Apologies for that. So why do we need a new map, right? We have the landscape, we have the trail map. Well, the landscape is pretty daunting if you're just getting into this space. There's a lot going on and it's hard to maybe know where to start. The trail map is very Kubernetes centric and it's very from a technical capability perspective. It's very useful for a team getting their hands dirty or even really growing their acumen with Kubernetes and with the suite of products around it. But we wanted to expand the focus of a map to include all aspects of cloud native, CNCF landscape to really provide a journey from an organization's perspective. So we wanted to provide something that could be consumed by like leaders of an organization so that they could leverage the experiences of a team that might have taken a journey on the trail map and gained some experience there. Maybe even we want to be our audience to include business leaders who are preparing for the organizational change that they'll have to go through over maybe the several years that this journey takes. And so that engineering teams can see what's on the road ahead, what they need to be training for and getting ready for to and also which tools are going to provide the biggest return of investment at each stage, say, of the journey.
The aim for the Cartografos working group is for organizations to start their cloud native journey with a real framework on how to adopt new cloud native applications and platforms. The authors of this body of work wanted to provide a cloud native framework for success. Our mission is to educate and inform users with effective and practical guidance to help them understand the cloud native ecosystem. We do this by collaborating with groups inside and outside of the CNCF. Next slide, please.
And so many organizations do start their cloud native journey with no real framework on how to adopt these new applications and platforms. As Robert has illustrated for us, the cloud native trail map and cloud native landscape provide very simple paths, but certainly not comprehensive enough. And as the landscape grows, we did want to provide a framework for how people may be able to adopt cloud native technology. And again, when starting down the cloud native journey, a common response from people is, where do I start and what do I take on next? So a key motivation for us, again, was to help people and organizations to make cloud adoption less intimidating and guided by artifacts that are able to give them meaningful assistance as they work to adopt hybrid or public cloud, and also as they consider any refactoring for applications that may take place. We work to also provide guidance on dealing with process, policy, and yes, people, as well as technologies, as all four of these areas are affected in any migration or process.
So when we all came together, the reason it's the four of us sitting here is because we had each worked on a maturity model. So Simon had worked on a maturity model that looked at, legacy systems all the way through cloud native and what that journey looks like. I came to the group because Fairwinds had created a Kubernetes maturity model that looked at kind of where you go with just Kubernetes. And then John and Robbie had worked on a maturity model as well. So we were brought together and got together earlier this year in February timeframe and spent time going through each maturity model, combining it, asking questions, building out like what is the maturity model that encompasses everything or as much as our view looks at for the CNCF, the different projects, the different phases you're at. So kind of from a February to now, we've come up with this one maturity model. So there are 5 main phases to the model. So what we assume is that if you are entering the cloud native maturity model or looking at it, you've already decided you want to go cloud native, you've already decided you're into open source, and that's the future of your business. So then at that point, you start these levels. And the first level is you're just building out your baseline implementation, you're in pre-production. You then go into your operation phase, which is level 2, where you have established your foundation and you're moving your applications into production. Level 3 is where you're scaling. So you know what you're doing, but now it's time to build like the repeatability around your infrastructure, your applications. Level 4 is improving. So that's where we spent time focusing specifically on security policy and governance. However, those things are built into all of the phases of the maturity model, which we'll get into in a moment. And then the final phase is optimization. And that's where you are really good at cloud native, but you have to go back and look and go, maybe we didn't make the right decision here. How can we optimize? How can we make it better? So we have definitions for all of these, and all of this is documented on GitHub. So you can see each one of that. And sorry, I do use phases and levels interchangeably. So I just saw that chat comment. So that's my bad, but we call them levels and phases. So in the next slide, one of the things we realized when we were going through all the different maturity models and pulling them together and then considering our experience as well is that we had 4 common themes. So we had themes of there's certain ways people need to work with cloud native, and they need to change the way they're thinking and the way their skill sets that they have. There's obviously certifications you can get and all of that within the CNCF community. Then we looked at process, or that came out as a theme where it's like there's a lot of process that needs to be put in place. We incorporated the whole shift security as far left as possible and that messaging in our process. Then policy. So obviously with internal policies, external policies, there's companies that have huge compliance requirements and mandates. All of that we looked at as a theme. And then finally the technology. So this is definitely not just you need this technology in order to achieve cloud native maturity. It's looking at what are you going to need across these 4 elements. John, I think you're up and on mute.
I say my best things on mute. Thanks, Danielle. That was great. So as we continue to gravitate to a cloud native world, we cannot have security as an afterthought anymore. Security needs to be a first-class citizen. Security is covered in all sectors of the cloud native maturity model, and each section with people, process, policy, and technology can be combined to support the security team as they seek to mature the organization's cloud native security. From the Kubernetes attack surface to the DevSecOps quality gates and guardrails, security policies and procedures need to be in place. Let's discuss the Kubernetes attack surface. There are a total of 10 attack vectors to address, from the container down to the network. How do we secure Kubernetes? We start by identifying the security threats in the Kubernetes architecture and the potential threats associated with it. You need to think about, how can I reduce the attack vector surface? Kubernetes can be a complex system. In order to mitigate the blast radius and reduce the attack vector, we want to do things like use minimum images. We only want to build our images with the libraries and drivers that we need to run the specific transaction. We don't want bloated images. Another aspect is quality gates, right? They are critical points along the pipeline in which a piece of code, image, or script gets tested, reviewed, or scanned to determine if the pipeline delivery process can continue. Additional tools like monitoring and control enablers need to be also included in the design. So when we talk about security and the mature model that we're showing over here, there's a lot to it. There's a lot behind the scenes. There's many different phases and levels, as we talked about before, that are part of this. And so our hope is that this group, this work group that we've developed is able to take everything we're talking about today and put this in a model that we can really take to the world and help others understand and to gravitate to this complex landscape that we have today. Next slide, please.
So as Danielle mentioned, we've tried to split up, kind of have swim lanes almost of the journeys across different aspects of the organization. So, what about people? We're technologists, so we tend to focus on other technologists, how we, see our journey. But, we wanted to think about the C-suite, the VPs, the program sponsors, project managers, cross trainers, people who maybe, trying to pick this up for the first time or understand, really wrap their heads around it. And maybe they're never going to be, hands on the keyboard, but they really need to think in a cloud native way, right? So, we wanted to express the organizational change journey, what teams need to be created or grown along the way. Do you need to outsource some of your skills along the way to expand, your engineering team or something? Your engineering footprint along the journey will probably swell and then start to contract as, layers of abstraction are put in place to make it easier for, your organization to be, truly cloud native, cloud first, right? So, you might see the journey go from a cadre of experts to a center of excellence to a community of practice, right? We have, we've called out some components for training. And we've also had a heavy focus. There's a heavy focus on the open source software community, right? Not only to consume from the community, but also to, give back in the form of, maybe at first it's engaging in forums, asking questions, proposing issues. And then eventually as you build your, your expertise, that, center of excellence, et cetera, you may even be giving back to the community, right? Either through tutorials on Medium or even source code that you've open sourced.
So, and for each one of these slides where we go through the people, process, policy, and technology, we specifically pulled out the security elements. So there's more to this within GitHub where you can see we go through different stuff, but we wanted, because you are the tag security group, we wanted to focus on the security elements. So for process here, like what was big when we were building the model was that we wanted to make sure security was everywhere throughout the model and that it wasn't its standalone thing, that it was important at each element. So we've made it a first class citizen throughout the maturity model, but also we're encouraging people, if they're using the model, to do that. So to embrace that you're shifting left in your process, in the level 1, you're looking at security straight away. How are you building it into everything you're doing? And then as you move forward, so, where is it in your CI process in level 2? At level 3, like what is automated? What continuous scanning can you have in place? How are you looking for misconfigurations or security issues as part of that? Level 4 is where it's about remediation and trying to automate that as much as possible. And then level 5, it's looking at your entire software supply chain. And so this is definitely about process, and it's definitely about making sure it's present throughout all of your processes. I think you're up, John.
Sorry about that. I love my my mute button. Okay, so as there is a policy and compliance, right? Whether it's CIS, PCI, NIST, etc., we need to secure a complex Kubernetes environments with policies. This is where tools like OPA, Open Pod Agency, need to come into play and become part of the environment's building blocks. Whether it's not to allow containers maybe to run as root, right, or let users change their folder to the root folder within the container. These policies need to be in place, right? We cannot continue to use the default policies any longer. With ransomware on the rise and other current attacks, POP policies are more and more important than ever. So it's very important for us as we built out this framework that POP policies was part of our compliance sector and vectors within our model. Next slide, please.
So we've moving on to some of the technology. I'll just speak at a high level here about technology and security and policy. And again, just as we've discussed, at level 1, where you're starting out and you're not in production, you still do need to be thinking about your CI, your CD, and starting to bring some security into that pipeline. CI is specific, very important in the early stages. And to loop that back to some of the people key area of the model, that's also going to be an important part of how you organize your groups. If you've adopted an agile model of working, for example, or adopted Scrum, okay, and speeding up that fast feedback loop. And then, level 2, we do want to see organizations work to make sure they're following good practice with secrets. TLS is certainly going to be part of a production infrastructure. And of course, authentication and authorization are going to be a really important, crucial part of that. And that's going to be not only in your infrastructure or your platforms, Kubernetes, but you'll also see that reflected as well within applications. We would expect to see that there. At level 3, we would again really see that you'd be taking advantage of CNCF projects such as OPA and Caverno. Again, they've already been touched on within the presentation here, but we can see how we can reflect how critical they are. And with level 4, we expect that you will be tuning policies within production. And we'd also think that you might be considering Falco and other tooling for additional visibility. And again, with level 5, you'll be carrying on a process of ongoing optimization and adjustment. Now, another further topic that's very relevant and certainly is important to bring up is around supply chain security. We know this has achieved a high level of prominence after the executive order that was issued this year, and also the high-profile attack that was on SolarWinds. It's a good example where we understand that Tag Security is running a working group on supply chain security and could be a really useful area of collaboration. We also feel that or see that additional tooling such as SPIFFE and Spire and the update framework can and should be well integrated into the model. So probably brings us to a stage now where I'll just give you a brief overview of the artifacts that we do have available. So just right, first off, we do have a GitHub repo, which you'll be able to see there, and we set up the working group earlier this year. We've incorporated within that the reference documents that we've compiled for the model. Now, there's a prologue document that summarizes the model, okay, and specifies who it's for, the target audience, how we divided it up, the 4 key areas of people, process, and policy and technology. Also, some discussion around if you don't fit into the model as well, if you think, well, maybe this is a bit prescriptive and how we've approached that. Okay, and when the right time might be to consider a cloud-native journey for you. And again, you can see here we've got the levels laid out. We also went into further detail as well with 4 further documents as well around people, process, policy and technology. And just to give you a flavour, they're laid out with an introduction, again, key categories within that, and considerations that you may want to give. And also we've incorporated, as you can see within people, just the category of security there. Now we have that for all 4 of the 4 key areas. Now we also have produced a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet outlines and summarises a lot of the items that went into that are in the model as well. This is a very much edited, abridged and cleaned up version of our original source material. And it outlines again the 4 key areas and various categories: organizational change, security, auditing, logging, CI/CD, change control processes, and within the technology area as well, we can see application and release operations, and testing and issue detection and policy as well. So there's a reasonable amount of content that we've put together there. Now, so that's that. Now, moving on to where...
You want to point out the template for that, because I know it relates to your next.
Yep. So, yeah, what I'll illustrate now actually is just a template that, Danielle's mentioned. Now, as part of a call for action for us, for the cloud native community, we've put together a template, and it's to start that conversation that we feel is so vital between the Cartografos working group and all the tags and projects within the CNCF. We do hope to present this work to all of them where we can. And what we're really interested in is we work on the basis that you know your area of specialty the best. And we're really keen to incorporate your thoughts on where projects may fit within a baseline. So for example, if an organisation is starting out, we've discussed in these slides how we see OPAR and Caverno fitting in around level 3. You're well into production and really starting to scale out. There are also other projects such as Spiffy, Spire, Tough, and we're really keen to understand Tag Security's thoughts on where they may fit within a cloud native journey. And the importance of this is we want to be able to provide organizations and individuals guidance on what they need to focus on first. That prioritization is often such a burning issue. Where do I focus my efforts? And how can I lay the best foundation now to adopt those projects in the future? And so if there are recommendations and thoughts from Tag Security on where projects can be adopted, where they may fit, or considerations that we can start to build into our written, if not graphical artifacts, that would be absolutely fantastic. We would really value that. So just as a simple example, we've got some little placeholders here. We may see Falco at level 5, could bring it into level 4. But of course, there's a real conversation there, and we would really love to have that with you and start that dialogue moving forward. So, just to quickly refer back to the slides here. So how else can you get involved? As I mentioned, there's the spreadsheet here that we would love. We'd love input on. We do welcome issues and pull requests and feedback in general. So please feel free to raise those. We do have a contributors guide and a charter, so we're well set up, and we wish to fit in with those existing community processes. And of course, we hold bi-weekly meetings every 14 days. And our meeting details are located within the repo as well. So we would very much appreciate your input there. So that just leads me to, I guess, the last slide that we have here, which is quite simply the questions slide. So if there's, we're open to any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for such an awesome presentation. So I want to open this up to everybody because I have a ton of questions and statements, but I want to give other folks the chance to talk.
I have tons of questions too, unfortunately or fortunately. I think this is a great piece of work. We needed something like this where we can assess, different enterprises as to what maturity level they are at. And my main interest, personal interest, comes from SaaS providers, right? There are small-time SaaS providers who use cloud-native technologies underneath that, and we have no visibility as to how mature they are in their management of their infrastructure and orchestration and all the security controls in their underlying infrastructure. So if we can evolve this to a maturity level where we are able to assess, SaaS providers and give them a score, a security score, I think a lot of enterprises will benefit from that, because not only cloud native supply chain, it's the whole SaaS risk that enterprises carry throughout. Is also important, and with cloud native technologies, that is increasing, ever increasing, I would say.
Yeah, actually, to piggyback off of that, that's a great example. I can see this potentially becoming a conformance attestation against a maturity model that organizations can express either on or certification, something along those lines that they can express publicly to their customers or internal to their employees, or something to that effect, to be able to show like their level of maturity and adoption. If no one has other questions, I will run down my list.
Go for it.
All right. So first off, I see a lot of great, valuable overlap with some of the current efforts and projects that this group is either sponsoring or partnering on. One of those is the Cloud Native Security Map, in which we're looking to group and provide more of a global view of that trail map that the CNCF has, but from a security perspective. So if there's specific tooling around a unique space within the Cloud Native Security Map, we want to be able to list those, so I can see some of the guidance that's listed here in the maturity model for specific projects to leverage that meet a certain kind of maturity category, linking that in with the Cloud Native Security Map. That way they can see other projects that are in that realm that can provide either feature parity or some similarity, or at least the value at that maturity level. So that's kind of the first thing. Brandon and Ash are kind of the co-leads for that, or they're working on that effort along with a lot of other folks in our community. Another group.
I have a
Go
question
ahead.
on that for you. So the way I understand that, just to make sure I understand this, so we'll have the two things, but we'll have interlinking between them to be like pointing from the maturity model to your map and like a circular motion, if you will. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that's one of the ways that we could potentially implement this. Yeah. The other one that I wanted to mention, and
Emily, can I quite chime in quickly here?
Of course.
Yeah, so since we're talking about the maps, so Simon, you mentioned you'd like to know where these projects fit in what like domains, like where does PIFIs fit in, where does OPA fit in. I think you can leverage that from the map because it has that categorization right now for all these projects. So I think with the combination of your maturity model and the categorization we have in the map, I think it could be a great fit if we interlink the two of them in some way. So,
yeah, that's fantastic. That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, adding to that, I think it'd be fantastic to bring this up to some of the various leaders in the various groups to get them to directly contribute. So if you want to say, like, how can we integrate something like Spiffy into this as an example, then we should ask the Spiffy community to actually go off and develop that rather than us trying to do it on our limited time and resources.
So, but my only ask for that is I want to caution some things. When I talk to, my customers, my clients, real life things, out there in the Fortune 500 and other companies, a lot of them, it's about patterns. Everybody wants to know what the pattern is for security, for Kubernetes maturity, those kinds of things. And then the tooling, the Spiffy, the OPA, everything else comes later, right? So first it's that, how do we understand what the patterns are to actually do this the right way? Right, on a scale of 1 to 5 in the maturity model that we have, each model, each path, there's a certain pattern to achieve that level of maturity, right? And there's many opinionated ways, prescribed ways we can do the tooling for those, but the pattern is the magic of what we did. I think within this maturity model, if that makes sense. And then if we want to, actually say what tools to use to prescribe them, then yes, I wholly think that, but I think the first thing we want to do as an ecosystem is the patterns, right? To make sure those are correct, and then add the tools to the patterns. That is kind of my vision, how I would kind of want this to be laid out as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, step one is establishing policy. Like, all data at rest must be encrypted, and then you set a standard, and the standard is like, we use AES, and then the actual procedures with the software you bring in to do that then has to adhere to the standards. So I can see that this particular thing fits into that really well, and it's easy for me to take this and say, here's a set of things you can create policy around that helps drive standards. So that this is an excellent start. And then groups like Spiffy and similar, I think would be more like a template. If you decide to use Spiffy, here's where it fits in. You don't have to use it. If you decide not to use it, you're not discarding the patterns. You're simply saying we have controls that are equivalent, that are capable of dealing with these particular things.
Exactly. And by the way, in case everybody's curious or not, most clients today, most customers today are at maybe 2.1 in the maturity model, right? And I'm sure you guys can probably agree with that from your own experiences as well. Yeah.
So actually, Frederick brings up a good point, as does Brandon and a few others. We have a security controls working group that has been focusing on providing the contents of the supply chain security paper as well as the cloud native security paper, and bringing about what do cloud native security controls look like for organizations to be able to be audited against some form of a standard. And I can see a lot of potential integrations and overlap here. Now, those controls as well as the supply chain security paper specifically do call out a difference in assurance levels for different organizations, in that a low assurance organization will not have the same security standard level as a high assurance organization, meaning they can't suffer any downtime. They have extremely rigorous security standards. I'm curious, have you considered in the maturity model adjusting some of those maturity levels given that different organizations have different assurance needs?
So we started out by saying that this is not all encompassing or all, prescriptive, because we're like, we're going to miss stuff along the way. So, and we tried to do it as valuable so that people could go, okay, I get the general idea, but we haven't gone to the level of, if you have a ton of regulations, or if you cannot risk downtime, you need to be focused on this part. So I think that's something we could add to it, but I do think that would require feedback from the community of like, this is where we should be here. And we also set out to say that, like, you might have one application that is like all the way to phase level 5, whereas another one is just starting out in the maturity. So like, it could even depend on the application within your organization.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point to also make, to state that it's not all inclusive. Like, in terms of, I'll give you a really example where we cannot really play 100% effectively, which is in healthcare, there's something called high trust that a large number of companies have to adhere to in order to operate in that space. And to become high trust certified, it's run by a private consortium. That private consortium requires you to be a high trust organization or a compliant organization that's aiming to become one. That has very strict requirements to join. And only when you join can you gain access to the definitions of what high trust is and what the baselines and benchmarks are. So if we were to say, hey, we want to help you become that, it's like we're out of the picture simply because we can't even gain access to the materials. So we should be careful on saying that, like, if we do this, you're adherent. That's an exercise for others to do, but at the same time, we can say, hey, if you happen to have these requirements, we happen to know that these requirements are in places like high trust because they're in NIST SP 800-53, and we've gone over that with a fine tooth comb, and so we're confident that you could probably get like 80% of the way there. It's your responsibility to fill the gap.
Yeah, and Danielle and Simon, to Frederick's point, I would like to add that you don't have to target this ultimate vision right now. You can do it in phases. CSA implemented CSA Star like that. They had a phase 1 auditability, score that they provided. Then they matured from there. So maybe we figure out what the roadmap to this vision state is and do it in phases.
Exactly. I look at everything as an elephant. I eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? This is no different than anything else that we do. Phases is 100% the way we want to do this. I agree.
So one of the other questions that I had was whether or not you were limiting some of the recommendations for maturity adoption to just graduated or incubating and graduated projects, to either encourage organizations to adopt incubating projects to help grow some of that community, help them reach a higher level of maturity, or in the case of graduated, if you're at a higher level of maturity, you really should be using graduated projects because you have that established need for functionality.
So when we looked at it, the four of us went, we're not going to be able to cover each project in the CNCF landscape. So we took the viewpoint that we would just incorporate graduated projects at this time, and that as they graduate or incubate more or whatnot, we could put them in. And that's really where we're relying on the tag groups to help us, because we can't be experts on everything, unfortunately.
Right, but well, I can be. Just kidding. about the patterns also, right? So whether it's incubating, it's emerging, or it's fully out there. I mean, look at Prometheus, right? When that was in Sandbox, it was still a great tool, and I use it in production, right? So you take it for what it is. But as we're doing these things, though, it's about the pattern. So if I'm emerging in level 5, but there's something that's incubating that fits into that pattern, I'd say we use it, right? That's my opinion about that. So the many things like OPA have enterprise like Styra editions, right? So I get the support. So maybe the other question is, as it go to a 5, so I want to be looking at projects that also has the enterprise level support as well, right? So there's many threads. This can get into many conversations, but I think it's also, not to be prescriptive, but this is also a case-by-case basis also, right? So one shoe does not fit all, right?
Yeah, sorry, if I may just touch on one small detail. We didn't impose a hard and fast rule, and we did give strong consideration also to incubating projects. We know that many incubating projects do have quite a significant number of deployments and attract a lot of attention even before they're formally graduated. So we were not hard and fast on that.
The other question that I had was, and I have not looked at the maturity model at length or any of the recommendations within it, but I'm curious, has the group actually looked at the existing documentation, guidance, policies, white papers that are either generated by the security tag or any of our sister tag groups?
We did not do like an analysis of each paper. So definitely an exercise that I think we could do. But I also would encourage, that's where we would encourage everyone's participation to help us do it, because
Yeah.
make it better.
I also think, to Daniel's point also, a big part of this was, from what we know, what are the best industry standards, the best business practices used today for this adoption, rather than they're looking at that to see what was ever created out there in the ecosystem. I think we built this on our own experiences of best in class solutions for our clients, and this is how it evolved, right? And then there's many different levels of that, and many different viewpoints and opinions, if you will, on other ways to do these things. And those opinions and other ways of doing it are within the CNCF organization, obviously. And I would kind of urge those organizations to look at what we did and sprinkle in their opinions into it as well. And then from that, it can evolve.
So if I may also just make a small comment as well. We've put together this work so far. We're really keen to use all of the resources that you've all worked so hard to produce. And indeed, that's part of why we're here today, so that we can start that conversation. It's probably most appropriate if we work with the recommendations of Tag Security on what you would like us. It's helpful for us if you tell us what you would like us to review, and we'll by all means work through that. It would be difficult if we simply took something that had been produced and then said this is, without discussing it with you first. So we really want to get that conversation going amongst us all. So hopefully that gives you some background as well.
Yeah, it does. And I think reaching out to the security controls working group, Aradna is the STAG leadership representative for that group, to talk through a little bit more of that, because we all know that the cloud native security paper is over 40 pages long, and the supply chain security paper is almost equally as long. So there's a lot of really good, rich content in there that we're trying to refine and provide better recommendations through our new revisions coming up. And the security controls group is breaking that content down into a little bit more digestible and actionable information for organizations and users, customers, and engineers to be able to take advantage of. So I would highly encourage reaching out to that group. I do believe that they have a separate Slack channel, tag-security controls, or tag security controls, one of those ones. I'll find it and drop it in the chat.
Wonderful. Perfect. Thank you. We'll definitely be in touch.
One quick thing on the security controls working group, we're discussing about changing the date on it. So if you're interested in participating, now is the time to join that channel and join in on the discussion there. I think the current proposal is we move it to Wednesday in the afternoon. I forget the exact time, but definitely please join us and let us know if that time works for you as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Frederick. Yeah, definitely we'll jump into the Slack group and try to attend.
Yeah, and some of us will be attending KubeCon live next week. Some of us actually will be on stage presenting as well. So if everybody's call is a KubeCon, definitely reach out to us. Love to get a cup of coffee with you and with the team and further discuss this if we can, please. That'd be amazing.
Does anyone have any other questions? Comments?
I guess the question is, if you can make sure that the information is on the notes so that I can join in and participate, because I would love to participate in some of the things that were listed here as well. They're right up with some of the responsibilities that I currently have in my job. So this is super useful. Thanks.
Yep, we'll certainly make sure that we get you all the details over to you. Yep.
Fantastic. So if you all could link the slides to the issue, that way we can go ahead and close out the issue and folks can refer back to it at a later date. I think that's everything. If you have contact information or a preferred way for folks to get in touch with you, I would also recommend putting those either in the meeting notes or on the issue. I already linked the repo on the issue. Is that everything? Fantastic. Thank you so much for presenting. I will give everybody 9 minutes back to focus on KubeCon and Cloud Native Security Day next week. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.